Right-wing demonstrators in Florida have been given a pass after breaking the state's new anti-protest laws during the demonstrations that have been against Cuban government last week in Florida. It was a big mess in Florida. Florida officials are now facing criticism for applying a double standard to protesters across the state. Brigida Santos joins me now to talk about this story. Brigida, first of all, as we watch this story develop, I'm wondering, did police in Miami file charges against anti-Cuban protesters last week? Were there actually charges filed?
No, last week, Florida police declined to charge hundreds of protesters who shut down the Palmetto Expressway for 8 hours in Miami-Dade County in violation of Florida's new anti-protest bill. Governor Ron DeSantis enacted Florida's harsh new law in April in response to last year's Black Lives Matter protests. The law makes it a felony for protesters to block highways, and it gives full immunity to people who drive through protesters. But in response to the anti-Cuban government protests last week, DeSantis tweeted that Florida supports the people of Cuba as they take to the streets and the rights of nonviolent Cuban American protesters. No arrests were made despite law violations. Critics immediately pointed out the difference in how Florida treats right-wing protesters versus other protesters who stand up against oppression.
Yeah, I'm looking at this, and I'm telling you, it's kind of a 50-50 shot whether this stands or not, because police powers, as we talked about on this show, are so strong. Police powers are incredibly strong. You can talk about where protests are going to be. You can talk about how long they should take place. There's all types of limitations you can put on this. So I'm not sure that this is a given that the Supreme Court's going to say, just strike this down. How are civil rights groups responding to Florida's anti-riot bill?
Yeah, a coalition of civil rights groups, including the ACLU, NAACP, and Community Justice Project, have filed a motion in a federal court in Florida to block the state's new anti-protest law. In a statement, the coalition says the law risks criminalizing peaceful protest, shields those who injure or kill protesters from civil penalties, discourages people from protesting, and infringes on First Amendment rights. And back in May, that same group also sued DeSantis directly and other state officials over House Bill 1.
Yeah, I'm not sure that these governors really care how this lands, whether the Supreme Court of their state takes it away, knocks it down. I think what it is, it's a factor that they're throwing red meat out to people who are kind of tired of protests. They went through an entire summer of it, almost entire year of it, maybe 2 years if you look back. And I think this is kind of the conservative governor's way of throwing out some red meat, knowing that it may not stick. How many other states have passed similar laws that undermine the First Amendment, as they put it?
Since 2017, over 35 states have passed anti-protest laws that increase fees and jail time for those convicted of damaging infrastructure and assisting protesters, even if they themselves don't participate in any civil disobedience. The laws significantly restrain First Amendment rights to freely assemble and, of course, to free speech. The new laws have been heavily backed by police unions and corporations. Many of the legislators who sponsor new anti-protest laws also back new voter suppression laws. Corporate donors to these lawmakers include companies like AT&T, Philip Morris, and R.J. Reynolds, to name a few.
Yeah, I'm not, sometimes you look at legislation, you say this is never going to live. If this one fails, it's going to fail on the way that it's written. There's some real illusory elements to it. There's some parts that if you were to look at, you really don't understand what the law is. And there's some due process kind of arguments there. But you're going to see some states where the state Supreme Court says, yeah, it's okay, and we'll see what SCOTUS does with it in the long run. Thank you for joining me, okay? Juul's been busted creating articles that say that vaping is totally safe and then paying a medical journal to run these articles that are a fraud. Joining me to help answer the question of why that happened is Farron Cousins from the Trial Lawyer magazine. Wow, this is the same program that we went through. As you know, you were with our law firm when we initiated the initial tobacco litigation all over the country. It started right here.
Yeah.
And we reviewed all the documents, the game plan. It's exactly the same game plan. What's your take?
It really is, and it gets frustrating when people don't understand. Not only that it's the same game plan, but it's really the same players. Altria, which used to be Philip Morris, owns a good percentage of Juul. It is literally the same companies. So what they've done here, it's the American Journal of Health Behavior, their May and June issue. They said, you know what, we're going to run 11 research articles here. It's going to be a special on vaping here in the United States. And they didn't disclose to their own scientists, the people working there, that, oh, by the way, all of these articles were actually produced by Juul, and they're paying us $50,000 or so to run this as if they were actual medically reviewed articles.
Yeah, there's two steps to it. First of all, they find biostitutes that will say anything, will write anything for the right amount of money to create an article that says, yeah, there's no health problems with Juul. Make sure your kids smoke Juul. Get them to smoke the candy flavor. That'll really be great. And then you find a guy like Albert Glover. You cannot talk about this story without talking about this cat, Albert Glover, who was the editor of this journal, the American Journal of Health Behavior, and retired after the article came out. What is your take on this guy and what happened here?
It is absolutely disgusting. It shows this paper had absolutely no journalistic ethics whatsoever. And again, he only, basically had to resign after the staffers and the scientists that they keep to actually peer review. Because keep that in mind too. I'm sorry, that was a part I glossed over there. They had to have their own, science folks peer review the articles. And he said, we got to get this expedited. I need you to peer review this, not in months, not going over the actual research, but you got like 5 days. You got a week, a business week to get this peer reviewed, get it back to me. Maybe there's some, cash involved here. And some of the scientists became so concerned reading this that they said, my God, Glover, they said this looks like it was written by Juul, and he was forced to say, oh, actually it was. That's what they said. They said there's no way Juul didn't write
You are
these.
going to love this. His quote, this is Glover's quote, I really didn't think it mattered to tell the people doing the review that the people that are wanting results are the people who phonied up the story, who phonied up the data, who made it sound like anything that they wanted to have on paper. And this guy has the audacity to call himself editor of the American Journal of Health Behavior and say, I did the right thing. He knows he didn't do the right thing. He resigned really after that. But he was really he was overwhelmed by the staff, as you say, that said, hey, we're reading this. You're talking about 2,000 kids that have been hospitalized from this. You're talking about a whole whole constellation of diseases that are directly related. We know that they're selling this so they can get a teenager hooked on traditional cigarettes.
Right, and we know all that. We're finding that out more and more each year. It's died down over the last year or so with the pandemic, people more focused on that. But Juul was looking at all of these lung illnesses, as you pointed out, developing in teens, over 2,000 different cases, all of it happening in teens that were vaping. You cannot claim this is safe. In fact, there's some scientists out there now saying this is as dangerous as traditional tobacco.
Just as you might imagine, the FDA is still out there scratching their head saying, oh, gee, we have to determine whether or not this product is a health benefit. Yeah. They literally are considering how do we determine whether this is a health benefit to young teenagers. I couldn't make that up. It's our dysfunctional FDA.